I'd tell you how excited I am. The last time I was here, I think it was as a presidential candidate and a mayor at the same time. I was flashing back to the first time I was here when I was going up and down their stairways out in the lobby there, and I could just see folks' eyes moving toward my name tag, trying to figure out who I was interning for. And it's since then only become a more important organization to me and to the country. When I was a mayor, I was convinced that local government is the level that gets the most done, that is closest to the people, and that is most critical in shaping people's lives. When I was a mayor, I believed that to be true. Now that I'm a cabinet official, I know that to be true. And we're counting on it.
Yeah.
And that is especially true in what we're working on right now when it comes to getting the president's vision for building a better America done. Let me take 50 seconds to walk through our top priorities, and then let's just jump into the conversation. So our focus is on safety, of course. That's why our department exists. It is on economic development and the ways that good infrastructure create jobs. It is on equity in the knowledge that we can either do harm or do enormous good in terms of who gets the opportunities we create and where they go. It is about climate, recognizing that every transportation decision is a climate decision, whether we acknowledge that or not. And it's about preparing for the future at a time when the 2020s are going to impact I think the future of transportation in ways more transformational than any time since the 50s, arguably the 1920s or even earlier. So with all of that in mind, the other thing that you realize very quickly in the cabinet is we're not actually playing the instruments. We're conducting. And you're the symphony. Most of the dollars that are allocated, those eye-popping sums of money, Francis, you were talking about, those are not dollars that we spend. Right? Those dollars that we get out to the states, our friends in the state transportation departments. And then just in case there are things that our friends in the state transportation departments don't see or figure out for themselves, there is a very healthy flow going out to our local partners too. And that is where so much of the action is going to be. So I promise to be brief up front. I'm so pleased to be here and really looking forward to jumping into the conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And without further ado, I'd like to defer to my good friend, Mayor Hancock from Denver.
Mr. President, it's glad to be up here with you, and it's good to see my good friend, our Secretary of Transportation. For those, Secretary Pete and I were fellows together in Aspen, and I just showed I didn't plan this, but I was showing him backstage, and that memory board that pops up on your phone every morning, he was sitting at the piano playing show tunes in Aspen. I said, you remember this? It was 5 or 6 years ago. But let me ask you, there are a number of great programs in bipartisan infrastructure law, but one that mayors are particularly excited about is Reconnecting Communities program. And it will be a topic of discussion at the special session after this luncheon with Acting Highway Administrator Stephanie Polak. Would you please talk about what it means for your department's strategy around transportation equity?
Yeah, so this is a critically important part, not only of the infrastructure law, but I think of our vision for transportation. Mm-hmm. The point of transportation is to connect.
Right.
We also know that sometimes transportation assets have a history of dividing. Literally, the expression wrong side of the tracks, right, tells us something about how a physical piece of transportation infrastructure has sometimes been a socioeconomic or racial dividing line. And sometimes that has happened in very specific and intentional ways. If a discriminatory housing policy or hiring policy is changed, that takes effect immediately. But when you have the legacy of a decision that was made, even if it was generations ago when it comes to physical infrastructure, neighborhoods and families and communities live with that for 100 years or more. We have a responsibility to use federal dollars to reconnect, especially in places where those same federal dollars were used to divide before. And so many of you have, I know, on the top of your minds right now, specific examples of where federally funded transportation assets did cut off one neighborhood from another, or literally remove a neighborhood, disproportionately black and brown neighborhoods. This is not, by the way, a phenomenon of one region. This is not a southern thing. We have seen it everywhere from Syracuse to Pittsburgh to Birmingham. And I'm not saying this to make people feel guilty. I'm saying this because we can do something about it. And that's what this program is about.
Yeah.
This is about finding ways to use transportation dollars. Sometimes it means a highway has to go. Sometimes it can stay right where it is, but we need to bridge across it or under it or around it. And those are exactly the ideas that are going to come up from the communities. So this $1 billion will be for a discretionary program to meet that intent. But I also want to add that if we get it right, the other discretionary dollars we have, the RAISE program, infra program, this can be one of the features of the transportation investments we make. And I would say definitely for our leading and more forward-thinking state partners, again, I don't mean to wink at this too often, but obviously different states have different levels of alignment between the state capital and the city. But an enlightened state will do this too, and will hopefully work with you to do it, and we're going to do everything we can to encourage that.
You mentioned this other leg of the equity stool, if you will, climate. And you've said publicly that every transportation decision is also a climate decision, and the bipartisan infrastructure law has several program components, including climate, including the $106 billion for transit. What are some of the other key climate programs, and how can mayors take advantage of that opportunity?
So it doesn't have to be called a climate program to have climate impacts.
Right.
And think about the simple fact that no sector puts more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere in the first place than transportation, which means, in my view, that transportation has the responsibility and the opportunity to be the biggest part of the solution. So what does it actually look like to do that? Well, a big part of that is transit. It's making sure people don't have to bring 2 tons of metal with them everywhere they go. And that's true in small communities when you have the right kind of transit options, just as it is in our big cities. But it's also, of course, about making sure that when you are in a car, that's cleaner and greener. That's why we're so excited about electric vehicles, right? Look, electric vehicles are going to happen, with or without us. There are 3 questions, though. Will it happen quickly enough to meet the climate challenge? Will it happen in an equitable way so that low-income families and rural families who potentially have the most to gain from the fuel savings can actually afford these things to begin with? And third, will it be made in America? It's in order to make those 3 things true that there has to be policy role. And that policy role for us, according to this law, includes investing in a network of 500,000 electric vehicle chargers across the country. Now, a lot of you have already been promoting or installing, sometimes even municipally owning and operating electric vehicle infrastructure in your communities. And that's really good, because I do not mean to say that we're going to have 500,000 federally owned and operated electric vehicle charging stations around the country. Our job is to buy down the difference so that they're actually equitable, and to provide you with the tools to help figure out where they should be sited. So we're teaming up with the Department of Energy to get that done through a joint Office of Energy and Transportation. Also, when it comes to climate, I have to talk, because you all are, and you live this, Mayor Suarez, and everybody in a different way, I mean, certainly in your neck of the woods too. We're not just talking about preventing climate change from getting worse, we're dealing with what is already happening because it's happening now. And that's what the PROTECT grants are. It stands for, I can't remember what most of our programs stand for. The R is for resilience. It is a dedicated fund for resilience, because that's what we need, right? I mean, if you have a road get washed out on an annual basis, does it make sense on an annual basis to put it back exactly where it was, how it was? Which might be exactly what our federal dollars tell you to do. Or are we going to fund you to do it in a smarter and different way? Can we prioritize roads that unfortunately are also needed as evacuation routes when we have more frequent extreme weather, sea level rise, wildfires, or whatever it might be? That's what the PROTECT grants are all about. So I know I'm name dropping a lot of programs, and I'm asking you to be ready for more to come out about these programs. Our job is to try to make this user friendly, because you shouldn't have to keep track of the 40 programs we're about to create. And I'm not saying that as an example. That's literally how many new programs are being stood up just in my department, just out of this law. Our job is to figure out how to make it user-friendly, and we're going to need to be in touch with you on how that works. What we want to get to is a level where the cities and the local communities can tell us what you're trying to achieve, and then we can guide you into the kinds of things you ought to apply for, instead of you having to master that federal roster of every corner of every program that you might go in for. Now, that's a big promise to make, and something that's easier said than done. But I believe we can get that done in partnership, and it's one of the reasons I'm excited to be a mayor in this role, because I know what it's like to be a mayor knocking on the door of the building that I now sit in. And as you've seen, the Biden-Harris administration is intentionally populated with a lot of people who have that experience as mayors, who have that experience in local government, who know what it's like trying to engage with the federal government from that local perspective, because we want to be a better partner.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. By the way, we're not going to quiz you on acronyms after this, okay? But as you know, this is a large program, and we as cities now are in the implementation phase along with you as our secretary. What can we do to make implementation easier for you? How can we collaborate with you to make implementation seamless and beneficial for our residents?
So again, this is ultimately going to be delivered by you, right? By you and by the states. And we need to make sure, first of all, that it's accountable, that everything's on time, on task, on budget. I can tell you the president is laser focused on this. We just came out of a meeting on this, on an update on implementation. And of course, as you might expect, he is very focused on making sure these tax dollars are well spent. We have to make sure that from the transportation perspective, the American people see $600+ billion worth of results out of all that money going in. Because another thing that I think every mayor has experienced is sometimes you have a big dollar amount and it doesn't automatically translate into that sense of results if you're not very careful. So we need to work on making sure that applications are prioritized, that projects are delivered efficiently. And honestly, the bottom up is where we're going to get some of the answers on how to overcome an issue that is problematic for infrastructure spending in general and for American infrastructure spending in particular, which is the tendency to go longer and cost more than it ought to and than originally planned. That means being transparent, smart, accountable, and conservative in the proposals on the front end. And then it means at every step figuring out how to tear down the barriers. And if we're the barrier, you got to let us know. And I, again, as a former mayor, know a thing or two about how federal processes can contribute to that challenge.
You know,
so we want to work with you on that.
You know, we're very shy here at the conference.
Yeah.
Mr. Secretary, you know, you've talked about so many of the new opportunities to fund our local priorities. What can you share with us here today that we can take back to our staffs and our cities to work on so that they can be ready to capture some of this new funding and help solve the transportation problems of tomorrow?
So first of all, I would say start with the priorities, and then we'll get to the programs. So safety, just to take one example. Safety might mean an incredibly sophisticated, advanced technological implementation across a major interstate corridor. Or it may be implicated in a traffic calming, complete streets thing you're trying to do in a neighborhood, and everything in between. Across each of those pillars that we identified, or your policy priorities, I shared mine, but this is about supporting you and yours too, right? Let's identify the priorities and then fit them to the list of programs. We don't want this to be a compliance exercise. We want the compliance to come on the back end of the policy priorities. The next thing to do is a lot of feedback. So it's one thing if we have a program like RAISE, formerly known as BUILD, formerly known as Tiger.
Pretty good on the...
Yeah, he's got that down.
Don't ask me to tell you what they...
Tell you what they stand for, of course.
You know, on programs like that, you or somebody who would be very happy to consult with you knows pretty much what to expect and how to navigate those programs. Others, we are literally standing up for the first time. And I promise you, we will take your input seriously on how to stand them up so that they are user-friendly, easy to navigate, and consistent with the actual priorities. That engagement, that conversation is so critically important in the first design of these programs. And I know that you won't be shy about it. Our job is to organize an efficient way of getting that across too. So we have a great team. Charles Small, if you haven't got to know him, is somebody who is fully dedicated to making sure that you all get the information you need. Maurice Henderson, a senior advisor in my office who is a chief of staff to a mayor and knows that perspective. I myself and a lot of others in our agency want to make sure we're having that conversation in official and kind of less structured means so that we can get a handle on that, so that we can build it right and build the programs right, not just build the roads and bridges right.
Mayors, please put your hands together and join me in thanking Secretary Buttigieg and Mayor Hancock for this amazing panel.